All right, everyone. It is Friday, February 10th. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Memory Lane podcast. This is Pat Finn, and I will be doing the hosting today. Shout out to Pete, Rob, and Ed. They did a really great job on the first ever Memory Lane pod last week, covering the UVA ball on the rim basketball game. Today, we are turning the page into football, and we will be covering the 2009 home victory over the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So today we got Brett Smith. Brett, what's going on? How you doing?
Good, man. Honored to be here. It's 70 degrees right now in February. It's kind of hard to complain, especially on a Friday. So, super excited to have Danny on for this. I will say one of the most memorable games ever in Lane Stadium.
Without a doubt, Brett Smith from the Locks of Saturday. And then, as Brett just hinted to, we do have a special guest to recap this one. You may still hear Sean McDonough's voice echoing the walls of Lane Stadium. Danny Coale is joining the show. Danny, I know last time we had you on the podcast, it was 2020. We're in the midst of COVID, and you were living in the Steel City. How have you been since?
Yeah, what's up, guys? First of all, pleasure to be here. Always love talking Hokies with you guys. I know a couple of things that just to kick it off. I told you before we pressed record, right? Like I'm ready for the Godfathers of Saturday. I feel like you guys are at this point where like you're doing great stuff, and it's only a matter of time before you guys keep blowing up and continue to do the great stuff that you're doing. But also, like, we're talking about 2009, right? And we're in 2023, so it's kind of alarming. I feel older by the day, just given my 3 kids, anyways. And then you throw in this, and it's a little bit of a gut check, man. But look, I'm doing great. We were in the Steel City last time we did this. Now we're in sunny Wilmington, North Carolina. Made a bit of a family move and a career move, and so I'm in the Tar Heel State, just another Hokie infiltrating the Tar Heel State.
It is significantly better without
Yeah.
video.
All right.
But
Sorry, guys.
No, you're good, man. I think Hokie fans are very familiar with what you look like. So,
all right, perfect. Well, we'll pick up from there. So, obviously, this is actually in the script. This is the first time we're doing Memory Lane with a guest who played in the game, and I have this written down. Bear with us as we relive some of the glory days. So, first and foremost, we like to hear about, what are kind of the initial thoughts on this game. Brett, what speaks to you about this game off the top of your head?
well, just personally, I mean, this is like core Virginia Tech, sports for me. I grew up Hokie fan. I'm like 3rd generation, and I was in middle school right now, so all I was really thinking about was still Virginia Tech football. So girls, whatever, that came down later, I guess. But Virginia Tech football was what I lived and breathed every single day. Every day was reading the newspaper. Every day was on. They didn't have Twitter really back then. Maybe it just launched, maybe in 2009. But I was on reading on my dad's tech sideline account, all the crazy guys on the message boards and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, for me, this game, was just like a core memory of growing up a Hokie.
That's about right. Danny, aside from the obvious reasons, what made this game special to you?
Man, like I think there's a what is it? I think it's a Phil Jackson quote, right? It said that the success of the team is the individual. The success of the individual is the team. If I didn't butcher that, if I got that right. This game's all about that, right? Like I think offensively, we weren't doing anything all game, and frankly, guys, like we wouldn't even be talking about this. We wouldn't have anything to be talking about if it weren't for Tyrod Taylor standing in the pocket, right, pump faking in the face of Ndamukong Suh, dropping a dime on the sideline, and then Dyrell Roberts bailing me out at the very end, right, to score the TD, right, without teammates like that and a supporting cast and just kind of continuing to grind and fight through it. we wouldn't be celebrating a memory right now as it pertains to the catch, maybe necessarily. So.
Truly a truly memorable experience. And we'll start off kind of getting in the time machine and talking about the state of the ACC, the state of college football, what was popular at the time in 2009. So we'll start with the state of the ACC. You had quarterbacks like Joshua Nesbitt, who we all know, unfortunately, from that year. Ja'Cory Harris, who was not what he
as
I guess
advertised.
I guess with LeBron living up to his legacy, Ja'Cory Harris did not do that. We'll put that lightly. You had Russell Wilson, who was backed up by Mike Glennon, Riley Skinner at Wake Forest, Thaddeus Lewis at Duke. You had Christian Ponder down at Florida State, backed up by E.J. Manuel, and Mark Verica up at UVA, just to name a few quarterbacks in the ACC. And then you come to Virginia Tech and the state of Virginia Tech football in 2009. We had just won back-to-back titles in 2007 and 2008. And this was a serious roster. We were in year 3 of the Tyrod Taylor era. We had some elite running backs. Ryan Williams broke some records that year as a redshirt freshman with 1,655 rushing yards and like almost 24 touchdowns. David Wilson was in that backfield. Josh Oglesby was in that backfield. Darren Evans was hurt that year. You had an elite receiving core with Dyrell Roberts, Jarrett Boykin, and his massive hands, as ESPN loved to talk about. Danny Coale, following the likes of Eddie Royal, Justin Harper, Josh Hyman, and Josh Morgan in the previous receiver era. And then this team was good at offense. Virginia Tech is always known for the defense and special teams, and this team could score points. Came into the game, or actually finished the 2009 season, ranked 24th in scoring offense at 31.8 points a game. And then on the other side of the ball, just another elite Bud Foster defense. This was the 9th ranked scoring defense. They only allowed 15.6 points per game. You had guys like Cam Chancellor, Jaron Hosley, Cody Grimm, Eddie Whitley, Jason Worlds, Davon Morgan, Jaron Hosley, Guveo Winslow, who's on the staff now, and John Graves. But what kind of really sticks out to me from the 2009 season was that this team had the 9th toughest schedule in the country. Obviously, you get out of conference games against Alabama and Nebraska, and that's going to put you up there. But it's definitely a little different compared to some of the schedules that we've had as of late. We were ranked as high as number 4 in the polls until those UNC and Georgia Tech October games. And this season concluded with a Chick-fil-A Bowl win over Tennessee in Atlanta. This was a really, really good football team. Brett, any comments on the 2009 campaign?
I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, the team was pretty unbelievable. I mean, I'll ask Danny a question. Going against that defense in practice every day. I mean, going against the 9th scoring defense. I mean, that had to have helped. Playing other defenses in the ACC every week. I mean, having to run across the middle against Cam Chancellor and then getting locked down by Jaron Hosley every week had to make everybody better.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I get that. There's no doubt about it. I get that question quite often. It's like, who is the best cornerback, defensive back that you went against in college? And it's an easy question for me because it was my own defense, right? Without a shadow of a doubt. I remember, Cam Chancellor's senior year, right? And we'd have the scout practice, and the scouts would want to see him come and show his press coverage skills, right? And unfortunately, I'd be the guy that he was honing those skills on, from a press coverage perspective. So I'd get beat up every scout practice. But yeah, I mean, it was J-Ron and the Fuller brothers and just the legacy of DBs at VT. There's no, in my opinion, a program quite like it, especially during that era of Hokie football.
So we're going to talk about a little bit more about 2009. Brett and Pat, where were we in our lives in 2009? We know what Danny was doing, but Brett, what was going on over in the 757?
I mean, I kind of said it earlier. I mean, I was in 7th grade. I hadn't even turned 13 yet at 2000 at that game. It was kind of, I think, it was September, so a month before my birthday. Like I said, I mean, I kind of nailed it. The only non-awkward thing in my life was Virginia Tech football. I was just that's the only thing I was able to talk to anybody about. You know, I lived and breathed it. I mean, every day I'd be like, Dad, what do you think about this? Dad, what do you think about that? You know, and I'd talk to my friends about it or whatnot. So that didn't really care about it like I did. But, you know, that's pretty much what was going on. I played lacrosse, you know, but still Virginia Tech football was still always on my mind.
I'm right there with you, Brett. I had just made the freshman soccer team at Del Barton. Was fired up about that, but was more fired up about the Hokies this year. I had went down to Atlanta with my dad for the Bama game, so I was living it. I was breathing it. I was, you know, the only kid in northern New Jersey who is, you know, wearing a Tyrod Taylor jersey to school every day. But yeah, that was me in 2009, just playing soccer and watching the Hokies with my dad. Now, the next question is, Brett, where were you for the game?
I was at the game. I was on the east stands. We've always kind of been around like section 7, 9, like road BB, K to KK. Like we've always kind of rotated in those areas. And I was there. I remember leading up to the game. I was actually at the Alabama game too in Atlanta. You know, we felt pretty good about this team coming against. You know, we didn't know at the time, but the Alabama team that goes on to win a national championship. You know, we'll get into the talk about Nebraska and stuff in a little bit, but you know, this Nebraska team really was no joke. So I mean, everybody was still nervous. You know, even though having Nebraska come beating them at their place, you know, thanks to a unsportsmanlike penalty, I guess, on Pelini kind of sealing the game, but you know, everybody was nervous. You know, it was a lot of nervous energy, but it was electric, as Lane always is. So,
yeah, absolutely. I watched this game in my basement at home with my dad and my brother, and it was awesome. You know, just like the next week watching against Miami, same spot. It was a fun season. So, what else was going on in 2009? The number one song on the charts, "I Got a Feeling" by the Black Eyed Peas, which is still overplayed in 2023. The number one movie in the box office was Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs for September 2009. Can't say I would have predicted that one. And then, Brett, what else was going on from this banner year of 09?
the swine flu. I didn't honestly. I had forgotten about that. You know, that was like, you know, the pandemic before, like the pandemic that just went happen. You know, people thought that was going to be Armageddon then, but they were able to, you know, get that under control a lot more quickly. I just remember all like the songs and stuff that came out about it, you know, back then. And then Kanye's, we talked about this earlier, Pat, that "I'm Gonna Let You Finish" with Taylor Swift, you know, pretty much catapulting Taylor Swift's career to what it is now, even though he didn't think that's what the case was going to be. And then my favorite one, 2009, Farmville launches on Facebook.
Danny, did you play Farmville, or did Coach Beamer not allow the players to get on Facebook?
Yeah, there are a lot of things we couldn't do back then that I think guys can do now. Let's just say that, right? But I feel like I've got a vivid memory of like David Wilson dancing to "I've Got a Feeling" during warm-ups, right, as it would come over like the intercom in the stadium. So it's ingrained in my brain like that, along with his abs at the same time for the rest of my
life. So also in September of 2009, this was week 3. So I'm looking at the September 13th, 2009 AP poll. Florida, Texas, USC, Alabama, and Ole Miss made up the top 5. And then 6 through 10 was Penn State, BYU, Cal, LSU, and Boise State. The rest of the top 15 was Ohio State, Oklahoma, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, RIP, and TCU. 16 through 25, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, Utah, Nebraska, Miami, Houston, Kansas. Kansas is there. Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, and Missouri. So, a lot of common folks in here, but also a lot of these teams have fallen out quite a bit. But let's talk about the 2009 season for Virginia Tech. We talked about the Bama game. High hopes for this team. We opened up with number 5 Alabama, have an emotional 10-point loss in the Georgia Dome to the eventual national champions, but had the lead going into the fourth quarter and knew that, walking out of that stadium, this team was going to have a great year. We go ahead and beat the brakes off of Marshall the next week. And this is the first taste of David Wilson in Lane Stadium. Brian Williams also, ran for 100 yards, but this was the Wilson and Williams show. Both of them went for over 150. David Wilson had 162. And then you got number 19, Nebraska, coming into town for week 3. And then following that game was the Miami 31-7 victory over Ja'Cory Harris in the rain, dominating in all 3 phases of the game. But Danny, outside of the Nebraska game, which is the subject of our conversation, what else do you remember about September of 2009?
In the context of, you think about you guys hit it on the head. Like we had a lot of talent on that team, but man, the year before was very much a transition year, right? If you think about, especially at the receiver position, when you have a flood of receivers going to the NFL, and we start out that year losing to ECU, right, at Bank of America Stadium, have kind of a wild year, lose to BC and Florida State when Tyrod and Sean and Corey Holt came in at the end. Those two guys went down with injuries to making it back to an ACC championship, to then win an Orange Bowl, right? Like, I think we came in to that season in 2009 with a lot of confidence, right? And we firmly believed that, one, the ACC ran through Blacksburg, but 2, any team that was going to come into Lane Stadium, like, good luck, right? And so when 19 Nebraska comes marching in, and it was just, those are the matchups that you sign up for, right? Those are the matchups that you come to Virginia Tech and play for, on a national stage against nationally prominent programs. You guys were right. The outcome of the Alabama game was not what we wanted to, but a relatively young team coming out of that with, you can argue all you want about moral victories, but there are reasons to kind of hold your head high after coming out and playing Alabama. And I think you look back on that game and there's some what ifs and woulda, shoulda, coulda. But we rolled through Marshall, and we're excited about Nebraska coming into Blacksburg, right? It's a storied program and unbelievable scene out there. And we've been out there, but in my mind, it didn't touch Lane Stadium in Blacksburg. So we were coming in that game just really excited about where we were as a program and ready to give it all we had for that one.
So you got a 3:30 game, September 19th, a top 20 matchup, ABC, Sean McDonough on the call. I think it was Matt Millen alongside him. Brett, who was Nebraska in 2009?
Nebraska was, they were no slouch of a team. Nebraska and Virginia Tech kind of, Danny kind of talked about, they're kind of, Tech and Nebraska a little bit synonymous, like the fan base, in terms of the fan base, kind of the culture, it's kind of how it was. Their defense, number 1 scoring defense in the country at the time, which is crazy. 10 points a game. That's on like Georgia 2021 levels, like, of defense, 2022 team defense. Also on offense, at Roy Hillou Jr., who was awesome running back. Then you obviously Ndamukong Suh. Everybody knows him. The boy, Will Compton, as true freshman out there playing. And then Prince Amukamara. Great. High draft pick, great quarterback. And then Rex Burkhead, who had a pretty long career in the NFL too. So, there were some studs on this. No slouch studs on this Nebraska team.
Yeah, you guys asked me, I'll say, you asked me about defensive backs that I've played, and no doubt it's Virginia Tech DBs, but Amukamara was up there in college. What he was doing, his as physical as he was, the size that he had, he was a really tough DB to go up against.
A lot of talent on that defense, as Brett said. It's funny to go back and look at, CFB reference and see that this was the number one scoring defense in 2009. But, you go ahead and you look down their Wikipedia page and you're like, holy moly, they were only giving up 10 a game, 3 a game, 7 a game. So, it all makes sense. And this team, they went 10-4. They lost in the Big 12 championship game to Texas on a literally last second field goal that, Mac Brown calls the timeout late. They were seconds away from ruining Texas's championship hopes. Obviously, Texas lost to Alabama in the national championship in January. And then this Nebraska team shuts out Arizona in the Holiday Bowl 33-0. So 10-4, this team, spread said, no slouch. And what a time and what a team to come to Blacksburg. So as we talk about the actual game, there's not that much to talk about. I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, this is probably one of the most boring 58 minutes to ever be played in Lane Stadium. Would you agree or disagree with that, Danny Coale?
100% agree with that. Yeah. I mean, we just couldn't. It was frustrating on the offensive side of the ball. Right? They were very good on defense, but you still have high expectations for yourself. And it was just a slow grind of a game where you pick your head up and you're, down 15-10 with virtually no time to go. Right. And you're like, kind of, we need to make something happen and it needs to happen soon. But yeah, really boring game. It's about
I want to say I'm pretty sure what happened was that we started out 7-0, and the only reason we really got down the field was because Dyrell Roberts brought us down at the 28-yard line on the opening kick. So I'm going to read through the drive summary real quick. We had a rushing touchdown from Ryan Williams in the first quarter. And then Nebraska punt, Tech punt, Nebraska field goal, Tech punt, field goal from Nebraska, Tech punt, field goal, halftime. Nebraska's up 12-10 at half. And then we got punt, interception. This was a Cam Chancellor pick. Punt. Brutal. Nebraska hits a field goal. Tech turns it over on downs with 2:26 to go. And at this point, this is where people start heading for the exits. Brett, when you're standing in the east stands, folks were heading towards lot one.
Yeah, I mean, people, were like, I think that's it. There definitely were people heading to the stands, no doubt. I mean, I've been kind of stayed tried and true, staying throughout the whole thing, and it definitely pays off, as we'll talk about in a minute. But I definitely remember that. And I'm rewatching the game recently. That it was not a good look, not looking good for the last 2 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I think you have to give an oh shit moment of the game nomination to 4th and 9 from our own 46 with 2 minutes and 7 seconds left. And Tyrod throws an incomplete pass to Dyrell Roberts. And all of a sudden we're punting, or we don't even get to punt. They're getting the ball in our territory with 2 minutes left. You think this game is over. And then all of a sudden, 3 and out, and we get the ball back at our own 25-yard line. And then what happens? Well, we're actually going to do something fun here. Pete did it with the gang on the last podcast. So if you could allow me, I'm going to play the clip.
Under a minute and a half to go. No timeouts for Virginia Tech. They need to go another 84 yards to win the game. Taylor looking desperately. Now throws it deep. Has a man open. Unbelievable. Danny Coale all the way out of bounds at the 3. He did not get in. Like we said, 58 minutes. It doesn't matter. It comes down to right now.
So I think we have to change the oh shit moment of the game to that one right there. We're 2nd and 4, and all of a sudden we're down at the 3-yard line. Brett, what is your reaction to this play?
I mean, I was on like the verge of tears, to be honest. Like when I was 12 years old, I remember my dad. He was standing next to me, and I remember the ball. No, I'm not even kidding. The ball just left Tyrod's hand. It's like going. I mean, you know how that throwing motion he had, just a flick of the wrist, it's just a dime going in the air. And Dad, I just remember him just yelling, "Holy crap, that he's open!" And we're like, "Don't." He's like, everybody's like, you couldn't hear a pin drop when that ball was in the air.
There are days where it feels like the ball is still in the air, right?
Yeah.
It was like
I mean, that ball was floating.
Yeah.
That ball was floating.
So on the topic of that play, obviously, Danny, the ball is still in the air. Jared Boykin wrote in, and he said, which wideout had a missed assignment on that play?
That's awesome. I think it was Boykin. It was either Boykin or Dyrell. They were supposed to run a dig route, and I don't think they ran a dig route on the backside.
That's pretty funny.
I'm guessing it wasn't you. No, man. Like the funny thing about that one is, I mean, we were obviously in a 2-minute drill, and I went to the far side, the bottom of the screen, and my route was an out route, right? Like it was a 9 to 12 yard out route. I mean, we know the outcome of what that would have been, but in a cover 2 shell, you take it up, right? And how often do you practice that exact same thing, right? In Nebraska would play that more often than other teams, but you get a cover 2 shell and you take it out and up, and there are really 2 things that typically happen, right? Like they either hit you right in the window for maybe a 15, 20 yard gain before the safety comes over the top, or your job really is to take that near safety and distract him, right? Get him out of the way and take him out of the play. But because Tyrod pumped it, Hamlin bit on that, right? So he was playing a little bit more shallow than he should have been. So he didn't really honor or respect the outside go. So it's kind of hard to put it in other football terms, but it's a route that I would say you run with the intent of being open, but the likelihood of you being open is low, just given the nature and the context of the situational football. And for him to pump and then see me come open, that's great. That is great caliber quarterback play, honestly.
Well, we were super happy about it. And, up until this point, this game was an absolute snoozer. And we were having some serious issues moving the ball at all in the second half. It was 15-10 at this point. We're down at the 3-yard line. And all of a sudden, it's 1st and goal with just around a minute left. But I got to ask you, Danny, all these years later, since we were having so many issues moving the ball, did anyone give you a hard time for not getting in the end zone?
Who didn't give me a hard time for not getting in the end zone? Or like that, you're in the weight room, the Monday after the game, and like you can joke about it, right? And why you got caught at the 2 and all that kind of stuff, and guys in the locker room giving you a hard time. But man, you replay that in your mind 1,000 times, right? And things that you would have done a little bit differently if I was a few inches from the further away from the sideline, if I hadn't turned around. Because very quickly with the following play, Tyrod getting sacked and the quarterback keeper, that's a very different play call set at that point in the game. You're long 1st and goal or 2nd and goal, right? The amount of plays that you can pull from, that you can call, becomes very limited. And so what went from like a you kind of like a euphoria moment where we're like knocking on the door to we actually need to score the football, or all of that for nothing, really. So I mean, but yeah, I mean, I wish I would have just put it in right away, but I had to provide a little bit more drama at the end, right? It wouldn't have been nearly as interesting.
I mean, I'd much rather have two epic moments than one epic moment. And, just Sean McDonough's call, Danny Cole all the way. And then he says at 3, he did not get in. And, it's the highest of highs met by the lowest of lows, but also just, such a high drama moment. So you mentioned this. We get 1st and goal at the 3, and then Tyrod is sacked for an 8-yard loss. And all of a sudden, we have a new oh shit moment of the game. It's 3rd down from the 11-yard line, and that end zone becomes further and further away. You get 2nd down. Tyrod rolls out right. I think he rolled out right and ended up throwing it out of bounds. And 9 more ticks roll off the clock. And then all of a sudden, it's 3rd down, 3rd and 11 from their 3rd and goal from the 11-yard line, and then roll clip.
This Nebraska defense has played valiantly all day. One colossal breakdown, but now they're going to cover it up with a stand in the final minute. Taylor, design roll to the left, now comes back to the right. Waving receivers around, nobody open, running out of time, finally throws, and it is gone! Touchdown, Dyrell Roberts!
Tyrod did it, Mikey. Tyrod did it.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments out of that clip is you can just see Tyrod had just given everything. He's got his helmet off. He looks like he's about to puke, and Beamer just got his hand on him, just like, one more play, we got it, one more play. That's one of my favorite moments in that clip right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it's so remarkable, honestly. That play, him extending that play, Dyrell catching that ball. I think one of the first things I said to Dyrell back in the locker room was just thank you, right? Thank you. You saved what could have been a much different experience for me. Team aside, losing aside, I can breathe a little bit easier these days because he showed up, right? Those guys just showed up, and it's a microcosm of bigger things, in that program and in those days and in that era of football in Blacksburg, where you can count on the guys around you, and it was pretty cool to see him come up with that play at the end. I was exhausted too, so I was running out of gas, so he was really only the only option at that point anyway.
I mean, I kind of feel my heart beating pretty fast right now just hearing you talk about it, even though it was 13 years ago. Such an exhilarating moment as a player, I'm sure, and definitely as a fan. And then 21 seconds left on the clock. Zach Lee throws an interception to Brock Carmichael, and it's curtained, and thank goodness, and Lane Stadium can exhale. And all of a sudden, the fans start storming the field and crowding around Coach Beamer and Holly Rowe. And I remember Coach Beamer was getting swarmed, and he had to shove some folks who were crowding up on Holly Rowe. And he was visibly angry, pushing people out of the way, which is a pretty funny clip. But what was the locker room like after that game?
Yeah. Much. He's just so authentic to who he is, and just won a huge game. Fans running on the field, but like for him, like the buck had to stop somewhere, and he had to like call out those rowdy fans there that were getting a little too close. But man, I mean, just think of like one of the best like sports feelings that you can imagine, right? I mean, it's one thing to sit there in a locker room after a win, going, all the highs and lows of a normal game, and then you factor that in. It just continued to kind of bring us tighter together. It's one of those things that's like, you think about in not only sports but in life, and you say it a lot, and then you see it in moments like this, but it's just that kind of continue to play till the final whistle has blown, right? You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have moments and seasons where, I'm not really sure what's going to happen here, but I'm just going to move forward one step in front of the other. I'm going to trust those around me. And give it everything we got, and it was one of those situations that we were fortunately on the receiving end of it too. And I got to say this too, because like, I don't know if you guys have ever interacted with Nebraska fans, but they are some of the most gracious fans you'll ever meet. When we went to Nebraska and we beat them in Lincoln, they were thanking us for coming and visiting their stadium. Like, that's noteworthy in all this, like class act from, maybe there were individual experience to tell me otherwise, but as a whole, pretty cool to see how they responded in a couple times that we played them.
Yeah, I think there's like I was saying earlier, there's like a mutual respect, I think, for state schools and, big, like tough nose, old school football, a lot of history. So I think there's definitely mutual respect between Nebraska and Virginia Tech, and there always will be.
Yeah, that's for sure. No, there's definitely there's top notch, top class program out there.
So Danny, the last question about this game, and then we have one letter for the lunch pail, or letter from the lunch pail for you, and then we can let you go here. But we got to hear about the celebration. How did the team celebrate this game? Like, what was downtown like? Like, what was happening after this Nebraska win in Blacksburg?
Yeah, I mean, it was wild, right? Like, I mean, I think I kind of still like looked like the punter or the kicker, right? So I had an opportunity to blend in, but I'm pretty sure we took a stop to a few of the establishments downtown. We hung out with some of the more senior guys on the team, and we celebrated, right? And then we got right back to work on Monday. I'll put it like that.
I mean, I'll tell you right now, I don't think you guys partied too hard, because you went out there and beat the brakes off of Miami. So there was no hangover from the Nebraska celebration, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was one of those, I mean, like celebratory, but also very relieving too, which is exhausting in its own right. So no, we celebrated as a team like we typically did, and then right back at it.
So our letter from the lunch pail comes from Grant Watson. He says, "What was the best piece of advice that Coach Beamer had ever given you?"
Oh man, it's easy. It's take care of the little things and the big things will come. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard that a million times, but he had it peppered all over our facilities. There wasn't a day probably that went by that Coach didn't say that, right? And you think about the success that he's had and the run that he's had, and it's so true, right? Like he preached going to class, right? He preached all the little things, and if you continually do those, the wins will come, right? Like if you continue to take care of the day in and day out. He trusted in his coaches around him. He trusted in his recruitment, the development of players, the community around us. And so, that's something that, man, I've now in the corporate world. And if I get a chance to pepper that into anything that I'm doing on a daily